Hello, everyone. Welcome to TRINKtalks. My name is Valerie Kathawala. I am a co-founder of Trink Magazine together with Paula Rita Sidore. We are thrilled to have a special panel of guests join us today to discuss Camilla Gjerde's book, Natural Trailblazers, which we will be discussing from several angles. I would love to introduce our guests first so you know who will be joining us today. First of all, I'm Valerie. I am based in New York City, and with us is Camilla Gjerde. She's a passionate natural wine lover ever since her first sip of Ariana Occhipinti's Il Frappato in 2008. She has explored the world of natural wine. But what matters most to her is the passion and the person behind the wine. She's the author of the first book on women in natural wine, We Don't Want Any Crap in Our Wine. Also, an excellent read. And her second book is Natural Trailblazers, which appeared in October 2024. Our second guest is Miki Smith. She is based in Virginia, and she is the founder of a wine project called Good Wine, which is working to move the wine industry toward net zero bit by bit. To do this, she's educating consumers and creating demand for climate-friendly wine through wine education and partnering with local shops to offer climate-positive wines. Christina Pieroth is joining us from the Nahe region in Germany. She converted her family vineyards from conventional to organic regenerative farming and bottles artisanal natural wines under her new label, Piri Naturel. She is fond of the steep slopes as a cultural asset, where she wants to preserve the old traditional Riesling and Pinot Blanc vines, but plants new vineyards with PV varieties and creates agroforestry vineyards, trying to create more stable ecosystems that are fit for the future. And I think in our discussion, as Paul is about to introduce, you will see how all of these characters and personalities fit together in Camilla's book and in the wider world of natural wine.
Thank you, Valerie. My name is Paula Rita Sidore. I'm based in Bonn, Germany. And I am very excited to be here today to talk with everybody about this important book, Natural Trailblazers. The book really poses a simple but quite profound question. What if the wine in our glass could be part of the solution to the climate crisis, not part of the problem? And to explore that question today, we're going to be following the book's own trailblazing path. First, we'll start at the source, exploring the personal conviction and incredible journey that put Camilla on a train across Europe to find these stories. Then we're going to step into the vineyards, where a quiet revolution is happening, a radical shift away from the perfectly manicured row and toward a wilder, messier, and as Christine said, islands instead of manicured rows of vineyards, and perhaps a more resilient way of farming that challenges what many of us thought we knew about viticulture. From there, we'll follow the chain to the winery and beyond to look at the less discussed aspects of wine, the surprising climate impact of a simple glass bottle, the taboos of transport, and the final journey to our glass. This is a conversation about hope, about stubbornness, and 13 visionaries who are working to change the world one vine, one bottle, and sometimes even one bike ride at a time. So let's dive in. To kick things off, we're going to start off our discussion with a bit about the book, how it came to be. So Camilla, I'm going to be looking at you and asking you to talk a little bit about how you ended up here. Your book really reads not just like a piece of journalism, but very much like a personal mission. You frame it with your decision to stop flying, to undertake this incredible journey by train and by bike. And we really want to understand a bit about some of the challenges you faced in your research. So can you talk a bit about, were there specific moments or conversations during your travels that reinforced your own sense of optimism and convinced you that these trailblazing actions matter in the larger context?
Big question, but let me just say thank you for inviting me, and I'm just so happy to be here with Christine and with Miki as well. I think that for me, this book was really important because I wanted to do what I could to talk about climate change and what we can do to mitigate climate change, but also to honor my decision to drink wine and to love wine and to try and combine the two. Well, it actually started with a frustration that we know that, well, or at least most of us know that we're in a climate crisis, and still we don't do nearly enough to do what we can to stop the heating of the planet and all the effects of it. So yes, I've stopped flying, and I just love traveling by train and with my foldable bike, my Brompton, with me. And yeah, that's that's why we're in Europe in my book, and mainly in France actually as well. It's a very it's difficult to travel long distance with or very very long distance, like to the US or to other continents. But
How did you identify the 13 producers that you wanted to profile here?
okay, so some of the profiles or people were all-time favorites of mine. All-time, well, like Christine, not so old, but very, very much favorites that I knew that I wanted to include in the book, because I think their work is just fabulous in so many levels, and we will get back to that. But so I also contacted importers in various countries because I knew that I didn't know enough about all kinds of producers and how they work and who to choose. And interestingly, there were only a few who responded, which I also take as as a response. Many of them didn't know or didn't understand the question. What do you mean, people who make wine in a climate friendly way? Even though I had pinpointed that it was the vineyard work, I had given examples, the winery work, and also the transportation bit on the move. But there were very few who actually knew how to, or perhaps knew their producers as well, so they could give me examples. But there were a few who gave me fantastic examples. So the ones I had by myself, that I had met on different wine fairs, or that I had visited, like Christine, I knew. And then the examples of from importers, and then some of the producers themselves added people that they wanted me to add, or they suggested people that they thought I would that I should include. So it was a mix. But what was quite interesting for me was that so many of the really trailblazing or extreme profiles were in France. I still haven't got my head around it, why that is. Is it the revolutionary 1789 just sitting there in the in the backbone of all the French people, or what is it? Is it just because since I'm focusing on natural wine is of course huge in France, but yeah. So there's a bias, quite obvious bias.
Was there a logistical bias as well? Just trying
Yes.
to.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I traveled with my favorite photographer, Cecilia, and she's got a small child, and she didn't want to be away for more than a week. That was where the starting point. And then I managed to get her to stay away for like 10 days, I think, on the second trip. So we did 2 trips. And so it was very much, a time, clear schedule, and very tight one at that. So if I'd been traveling alone, it would have been, more relaxed. I could stay in more places, and I would probably have gone to more people, although not necessarily include them in the book. But there are always constraints. So and then of course I live in Sweden. There's always it takes a day just to go down to Christine in the Nahe. So takes quite some time when you travel by train, although it's rewarding as well.
I actually have a question. Were there any stories that you were not able to fit into the book that you think listeners would be curious to hear more about?
Yeah, there is one that I had. Well, I actually have written it, and it was all finished, ready to print, when I got the message that this particular person, a woman called Saskia van der Horst in Roussillon, in the south of France, of Domaine Les Arabesques, she decided to quit. So that was just a few months before publication. And she's in a very, very dry area, and they hadn't had rains for 3 years at the time. This year they've had rain, so maybe she regrets her decision. I don't know, but she's a really. I met her because she works organically. She works manually. She's really feeling climate change. Temperatures are really rising. In the south of France as well. I mean, Europe as the continent that feels climate change the most, I mean, in temperature-wise. So it's rising the fastest of the whole world. So she feels it too, and that was one of the reasons she decided to stop. So it's a sad story, and of course I could have included it, but I wanted the stories to be inspiring. And someone quitting is not that inspiring, so I decided to let her go. But yeah, she's her wines, if you can get them, her last vintage is 2023. So if you can get her wines, they are really beautiful examples of the south of France, but without the high alcohol. So
I think that's a really important element to talk about. I mean, when Paula highlighted that some of these, or you, Camilla, highlighted that some of these growers are among the most extreme in their progressive viticulture or other practices, it's because they are meeting such an extreme in the climate and social structure. So it feels like we need to meet this moment with these increasingly pointed measures. So, I mean, one question that leaped out to Paula and me, because of course we look at everything through this German speaking lens, is you have obviously, for excellent reasons, included Christine here, and you have Mythopia in Switzerland, even if not necessarily the German speaking part. How did those two producers make the cut? And did you have an abundance of others you could have tapped, or was it harder in those areas?
well, Christine made it to the finals because she's just an incredible person. No, but she is. When I met Christine, I felt that she is exactly the kind of person that I wanted to write about, because she works incredibly hard in the vineyard, going from conventional to organic, but not only that, but working to include different kinds of trees, hedges, like permaculture in the vineyards, and not opening the soil to avoid releasing carbon. And she has planted PIWIs, like the hybrids that don't need as much spraying as the vitis vinifera that we know. And that, of course, makes it possible to avoid some tractor the tractor sprayings as well. So many reasons why Christine got to the finals, but those are a few. And also, of course, I mean, I don't know if we will talk about biodiversity, but I mean, that's one of the reasons why Christine does what she does. I mean, she wants to increase biodiversity in her vineyards and really have a real nature in her vineyards and not just like wines. And then Mythopia, they had been on my list for very long, and then I was uncertain. I was a bit in awe of them. I don't know why. You know, sometimes I'm just afraid of people. I don't know. And then the Soulier brothers, who are included in the book, Charles Soulier said, you need to go to Peter in Switzerland and talk about how they work. So, of course, I knew of them and all of the work, and then I decided, okay, yeah, let's go. So, and they work completely without machines in their vineyards. They're very steep vineyards. They have, they also have PIWIs, but what they do, which is what I focus most, or what I try to focus on in the book, is that they use a biochar to not only do they not open their soil, but they burn all their cuttings from the vineyard work in winter and spring, and burn them in a climate where you not release the carbon, but you store it within the char. So when you dig it into the earth, the carbon can be stored for thousands of years. So it's really a way of going to or getting to carbon neutrality, or even to carbon minus. So it's one of the examples of what you can do to really make a difference. And then to the question of, yes, of course, there are just so many people I would have loved to include in the book. And there were many, many, many on my long list. And many of them in Austria and Alto Adige, and some in Germany as well. So, for instance, Thomas Niedermeyer in Alto Adige with his PIWI work. He's really a pioneer of the PIWIs and also biodiversity. We have like Marion and Martin Goyer of Pranzegg that I really love. Their vineyard work focus on biodiversity and planting trees and all kinds of stuff, including animals in the vineyards. Alwin and Stephanie Jurcic in Kamptal, Austria, for being just, part of organic, getting other people to work organically, and in having trees, planting trees in the vineyards, working with horses, and just being amazing people. Also, Heinrich in Gols in Burgenland for their work with cans, and also for being a huge producer with almost or around 100 hectares. Then Jas Swan of Katla in Germany for her work with kegs. She was also on my list. So there were a lot of people, inspiring people. So the idea of the book is not to say, oh, these are the ones who do great work and look at them, they're fantastic. Yes, you can do that, but it's not like they are the only ones. They are just, or not just, but they are simply examples of what people do. And although some are, all of them are trailblazers, but it's not to say that there aren't other people out there doing fantastic work. So it just some of the inspiring examples that I found
That's
Excellent.
fantastic.
And I'll just jump in here before we maybe shift the focus to Christine and her work, just to let listeners know that we have a profile, an excerpt, first of all, from Camilla's book about Mythopia. So you can read it and get more detail about the biotrial work that's happening there and get a better sense of that estate. And we also have a feature on Christine from, I think it's from 2021, before Camilla wrote her book by another author. So there are opportunities to dig in there to both. Yeah, so Christine, tell us, I mean, you're the one out there doing the trailblazing. Tell us what it's like. Tell us a little bit about your region and the kind of circumstances in which you're working and what inspired you and what you feel you can do to change the climate impact of your wines.
Sure, yes. Yeah, a big question.
Yeah.
Let's start at the beginning a little bit. So, yeah, so like I'm based in the Nahe region in the southwest of Germany, and unfortunately, there's still only very few producers in the valley farming organically. We already talked about that before very briefly, Valerie.
Yeah.
It's, I guess, for several reasons, which would probably be too much to dive into right now, but that's a fact. That's for sure. So also for me, like I grew up on a conventional farm back in the days. My parents farmed conventional. And like I've always been interested in yeah, like everything that has to do like with nature and generally the outdoors and like gardening, foraging wild herbs and everything. And yeah, I've always been interested in our vineyards and felt part of it. And yet, kind of looking back, I guess like that's something I realized only later, that I felt like the way we did our farming back in the days, um, it was not very much part of nature. It was not part of it. It felt like very disconnected, actually. And this is only something I realized later and was not, I guess, aware at that point because I was not obviously as involved as I am today and responsible for everything. So, yeah. So moving like after school, I moved to BC, Canada for a while, where I worked on several small organic farms and where I realized, okay, wow, this is so inspiring to live and work. Yeah, live, work, and like not only how do you say, like, and also learn from the land that you're on, that you live at, that you work with, and just yeah, that felt so inspiring and like it felt so connected to the surroundings. So when I moved back to Germany and first of all did my studies in Geisenheim and lots of internships and everything, and eventually came back full time to the winery, I knew for certain like this is something that I'm want to work on. And so first step was yeah to change, to convert our vineyards to organic. And luckily my parents were up for it. It was not that they were opposed to before, but they of course knew how much yeah more time intense and labor intense the work is, especially in the steep slopes. Like we farm some vineyards that are also not that we can't use any tractors. So especially in those vineyards, but also in other vineyards, in the flat vineyards, it's just generally more, yeah, much more work to farm organically. And so those are things that don't happen overnight. Um, as everything, you know, like in farming, working with soil, working with nature, it takes time. But yeah, it felt good, and so I was like, okay, let's just go for it. We'll just get started. And then I quickly realized organic is not enough. Thinking about how fast climate is changing, we really feel how extreme the years are. We are directly affected, not only in the actual farming part, but everything that goes beyond it. I mean, sustainability has all these different aspects, so everything is affected, obviously. So yes, I just realized, okay, like we need to I want to look at our vineyards more from this permaculture perspective of like where we are what's like we are as part of, again, like as part of nature, as part of the landscape, as part of our culture here. So bringing all these aspects together, from the last new plantings that we did for the last years, I always try to include more trees and try to include wild hedges that we plant along the side of the vineyards. Look at where the slope goes, like where the wind comes from, where the sun comes from, like try to bring all this into our consideration of how we plant the vineyard, and to eventually create a more stable ecosystem of vineyard. So I feel like it's like we really need to look at things like farming and bringing nature together. Like they're not opposed to each other. Like we should look at it, bringing it together. And the landscape has changed so much. If you look back to like the 50s or 60s, you can hardly compare it anymore. So yes, so yeah, this just kind of as a general outlook of what I'm working on. Yeah.
Well, that actually brings me sort of perfectly to the next thing that I was wondering, which is, I know in Geisenheim, much of what you're talking about historically was not taught. And so how have you found that the conversation around PIWIs, around agroforestry, has evolved, both since the book was researched, but in general from when you finished with Geisenheim, when you said this is the way that I want to start? Are other growers being more accepting to these ideas? Are customers being more accepted to these ideas? And afterwards, Miki, I'd love to hear you chime in as well on your thoughts as to what you hear sort of on the other side.
So like talking about the new varieties, the hybrids, the PIWI varieties, I feel like the perspective of the growers is maybe getting a bit more like positive towards the PIWIs. It's happening very slowly, unfortunately, and I think it's actually currently more due to the market being under pressure.
Mm-hmm.
So things are changing very, very slowly. From the consumer perspective, I feel like it's still quite hard because people generally try or like to drink what they know, or kind of think they know what to expect of, or but yeah, like from my personal perspective, I just see all the positive aspects already, like not only regarding the vineyard and the soil and like less spraying, less soil compaction, less fuel that we're burning and so on, but also one aspect that is often not talked about enough. It's like I see the positive impact on us as well, like the humans behind the wine, because I feel like in some years, like we really struggled to get through the season, to manage to have healthy grapes at the end of the season. And that's only because I don't know, in the peak season, I work like 7 days a week to make it happen. So having the more PIWI vineyards now each year a bit more, it's a big relief. It's really a big relief. So this is another aspect that's often not really talked about much, that it's a physical and also mental relief for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's so important. Can I just, not to make you the PV spokesperson, but just a question I have, because PVs are designed to be fungus resistant varieties, that's their main attribute. How does that factor into the increasing patterns of drought and heat stress that we see in Germany? Because my understanding, they're not necessarily equipped to deal with that particularly well, or is that also a feature?
It often goes along.
Okay.
So on the one hand, they're more fungal resistant, and one reason, not the only reason, but one reason is because also the skin is often much thicker.
Mhm.
So for some varieties, they are definitely less impacted by sunburn throughout the season. They tend to stay healthier on the vines because the skin is much thicker. They get less botrytis or less not only fungi as of like mildew, downy or powdery mildew, but also rot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, there's different aspects, and they cope with climate change very well. Yeah.
So they
Excellent.
adapt as well?
Well, like it takes a long time for a new variety to be finally available for us growers. So, like when a new variety is like when someone starts working on a new variety, it takes, I don't know, 20 years until it's finally for us available to plant in the vineyard. So, of course, 20 years ago, it was, again, the climate is changing so quickly, right? So I'm not sure if you can say like they adapt continuously. There's still so much we also need to learn and explore what's going to happen. But they're definitely, made in all this thought that climate is changing so fast, and we need varieties for the future. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you. Miki, what's your take on it? How are people responding to it? What do you hear?
Yeah, such an interesting question. So, so here in Virginia, so I'm just outside of DC, in Virginia, and there's such a great kind of burgeoning wine scene in Virginia in particular. So, you know, kind of as part one of my efforts in kind of trying to move things forward was to have a wine club for about 2 years. Um, and we had, wines offered to consumers and a local shop. And I was really trying to test the idea, and hybrids being one of them, that, putting climate at the center of the conversation had resonance for consumers. Interestingly, and I wonder if this is sort of rooted in the United States, I felt that there was more openness to something like a hybrid, for example. So I think, people who are newer to wine, or people that are, even if they're not as new to wine, I just didn't notice that, like, I didn't notice a resistance really. So that was kind of exciting. And one of the ways that I tried to kind of have reframe the conversation around some of these changes that maybe were not classic or traditional was to frame it as experimentation, and get people excited about kind of participating in new ways of doing things. So in Virginia, I had a wonderful test case that, I could just pick up on here in Virginia, where hybrids are actually becoming a key part of the conversation, particularly with growers. There's, a couple of people in particular in Charlottesville, and then Northern Virginia as well. And there's one individual in particular, his name is Tim Jordan. He's down in Charlottesville in Virginia. And I think his goal is to really ultimately transition only to hybrids. He is a scientist, so I think, he may have an easier time than some folks in terms of kind of thinking through this systematically. But I don't want to, throw shade on others. I think there's a lot of great potential there. October is, Virginia Wine Month. So the couple of years that I ran the club, we focused specifically on Virginia and on those efforts, and kind of try to get people excited about, this is a test case, a lab for experimentation. And I think we had that was actually one of our more popular months. So I think it's kind of about the framing of it, kind of trying to say, you haven't heard that much about Traminette or Vidal Blanc, but have you, if you like Petit Manseng, maybe you like this other variety. It's not Vitis vinifera, but it's wonderful. So some of it too is kind of for consumers gauging how much education they actually want to participate in too, because they might not want to know all the backstory. They want to know, is it delicious? Tell us more. So yeah, that's what I've experienced.
Like I totally agree. That's such a good point that you're mentioning, Miki, because that's like the word PIWI in German, like it translates to like more fungal resistance. So that doesn't sound very appealing. So
Not super delicious,
Right.
you mean?
Starting with fungus, you're like, no, let's get it back. Yeah.
So I totally agree. It's always like, yeah, where to put the spotlight on, and yes, so totally agree.
Yeah.
Although I think your wine, your first PIWI wine with the name Aurora, is a perfect example of how you can frame it, not to be like PIWI is the name of the wine. It's like no, it's something that sounds delicious and is delicious. Yeah.
Definitely. Miki, something that you said in a separate conversation that really interests me is your interest in discussing climate as a social good. And I really think that gets to the heart of what Camilla and Christine are doing. But I think it's something that is lost in the natural wine conversation far too often because there's such a focus on the cultural rebelliousness and, this is a breakaway movement that will reframe wine for a new demographic, a new generation. But that climate as a social good component is, I mean, for me, that is why natural wine is interesting to me. And I feel like that is still a stumbling block in communicating what exactly happens in a vineyard and a winery and in the last mile of getting those wines to people. What can you elaborate a bit on your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks, Valerie. I know we've had lots of wonderful, fruitful conversations in this area. Um, I, I initially started Good Wine, my wine project, because as you said, Valerie, the natural wine movement is this wonderful kind of animated, well-intentioned movement that I just really respond to. But I had noticed that there was sort of this, um, sharpening of the conversation that we could do around the climate change piece, and kind of, if when making purchasing decisions or, decisions as a grower, the climate part is the main focus, then it could have more impact because you're really making those choices for the reason of, reducing your impact on the planet and making more climate positive choices. The other reason why I thought that wine would be I'm kind of a sustainability and climate change advocate. I'm very passionate about the issue. And I just felt like, if we can get people excited about this topic while they are doing something, as you said, Camilla, your favorite thing, drinking wine, it's a wonderful entry point for kind of trying to move people along the spectrum in their purchasing decisions. If you love it and there's something really special about it, this wine is fresher than you have ever had before, especially if you bring in sort of a consumer who's very used to sort of more classic or conventional wine flavor profiles or aroma profiles, especially flavor profiles, just, telling them, look, the reason why, like, there's a connection here between this really fresh juice and some of the practices in the vineyard or in the cellar. And I just felt like, there are all of these other really interesting places where people have already really bought into the climate impact conversation, whether it be in fashion with certain brands that now even these really wonderful fashion brands include on specific, items on their website, what is the climate impact, or what choices did they make around cotton, and how would they rate themselves? Are they doing better or worse? Would they like to improve upon this, practice? And that really speaks to me as a consumer. I'd rather spend my dollars there than elsewhere where I know that, like, I'm really contributing kind of this fast fashion. Oh, it just makes me like, ooh, fast fashion kind of process. And so I just thought there's no reason why wine shouldn't be moving in that direction, and we shouldn't be bringing consumers along in this thought process as well. So that's why when Camilla's book came out, I was like, I probably jumped up and down actually. That was a little extreme, but I was just so excited because you don't see that kind of, those issues highlighted in that way, and such a, wonderful work. So
True. And yet, Camilla, your book, I mean, while certainly providing all the positive examples, you don't shy away from the challenges. For instance, I think it's Eric Texier trying to get his wines in keg and finding so much resistance to the idea. Can you talk a bit about how we have a terrific producer, phenomenal wines, willing to do the work, and yet the market won't meet him even close to halfway?
I was actually thinking when Miki spoke that think that it has to do with, well, the resistance has to do with being a traditional wine country or wine producing country or not. Like Miki says, consumers in the US, for instance, they are much more positive towards experimenting and trying out new wines, new grape varieties, but also different kinds of packaging. So wines in kegs or in a bagnum, like a pouch. That's not a big deal, or a can. But for French people, Italian people, in Spain, even Germany, people tend to want their wine in a bottle, so a glass bottle, and it should look fresh and new and very, very nice. So that's that's the main problem that Eric Texier, for instance, has encountered. That people just want their wine in a glass bottle. And end of discussion, sort of. So it's much more easy for him, for instance, and for everyone, I think, who make wine or who makes wine in alternative packaging, to sell it or to export it, like to the Nordic countries, to the US. Not sure that it's a big hit in Asian countries yet. Kegs, in some countries like Thailand, or where they are used to, drinking beer from tap, they're absolutely open to it. But I don't think like Japan or South Korea. But I mean, generally, export markets where they don't produce their own wine is much easier, and that goes for any kind of alternative to the traditional glass bottle. Or traditional, I mean, we haven't had the single-use glass bottle for that long, so it's very strange that we're so caught up with focused on the idea that this is how we should how wine is served. So it's but I just love hearing about people who also reuse bottles. So you can still have the glass bottle, but you just use it over and over again. That's also very inspiring to me, and something that we should do a lot more. And we have the capacity to do it, and we used to have it, and we do it with beer bottles. We do it, I know, in Germany. I mean, you're great with reusing bottles, glass bottles. So it's because reusing, the glass, the problem with the glass bottle is that it's just so energy consuming to make it, and the energy is fossil fuel. So but if you use it, just reuse it like 3 times, then it's already better than producing a can. So it's just and you can use or reuse a glass bottle for like at least 30 times, no problem. So it's just seems like a colossal waste not to do it. So yeah.
Especially when upwards of 90% of all wines purchased are consumed on the day. They don't need to be in something with a cork stopper built for age.
No, that's one of the reasons why alternatives to glass bottles is a good idea, and also that it's much lighter, like the kegs and the pouches and the cans for export markets. So you reduce the CO2 emitted when transporting stuff on long distances. But then also for the lovers of glass, if we could just reuse them. And I know there are examples of like Sophie Evans in the UK, who reuses or only uses reused bottles for her wines. So she gets bottles from restaurants in London to her winery in Kent. So just quite close by. And also the Beckhartwigs in Alsace that I write about in my book. They reuse about 15 to 20% of their bottles. They go get their bottles in nearby Strasbourg with their electric car, and then have a private way of reusing the bottles. But what I would like to see is a new standard. Yes, lots of private initiatives, and they are great, fantastic, and keep on doing it. But there should also be some pressure on the industry to make it easier for people.
Sort of leads me to one of the things that I was thinking about, which is you raised so many beautiful examples of small, niche, creative solutions that work very much on a micro scale. But what about that next step? How do we get to that next step of either catching the interest of or the attention of, I guess I should say, some of the larger operations? I mean, you mentioned Heinrich, which is fantastic with 100 hectares, and that's one of my go-to examples when someone says, biodynamics, no, it doesn't work on a large scale. Well, actually. And so what did you find when you were researching the book, when you were writing the book? Where would you like to see the next step happen, or any of you? I was speaking directly to Camilla, but if anybody, what can we do?
I think that the next step is, well, one of the next steps is already here. Like one of the examples in the book is a Swedish importer, Ida, who she's a pioneer of getting wine into kegs, and to get them around Sweden into bars and restaurants. And she has seen that the big conventional importers have got their producers to make their wines available in kegs. So her thought is that, even though she only works with small producers with a tiny production, she has seen that just by being an example, she can change the way the other importers and producers work. So I do think that even though the examples in the book are tiny and it's a small production, it's like it's not even the tip of the iceberg. It can shift something when people realize that it's not necessarily super complicated to do things and do things that actually matter a lot. So being small doesn't mean that you can't affect others.
Small does not have to equate to insignificant.
No, exactly.
I think so too. Like it's I think the next step or is already here, basically, that we really have to talk about it. We have to be open about it and take away the fear of something new or something unknown. So what you mentioned about the kegs, Camilla, is exactly what we experienced. Like last year was the first time I bottled kegs, also a project with my friend Yasmin. And it was exactly like that. A lot of people were first like, oh, this is new. This is strange. We don't know how to deal with that. But now that, like we've been talking about it, and we've also showing, and we brought it, for example, to the Loire in February to for people to be able to take a sip from the keg and taste themselves, and everything tastes good. And of course we made it fun, and we kind of decorated the keg. So I think we have to be positive about it, and take away this fear. I think that's a big part of it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Your wines are widely exported, Christina, right? That the bulk of your market is outside of Germany. Is that correct? Yeah. So, okay. Yeah, almost all of it. So do you find that your exporters or importers are more receptive to the idea? Do you get more traction there, or is that still a discussion?
In some countries, you can tell that it's more common already. So especially in Sweden, for example, um, we like last year when Camilla had the book release in October. Yasmin and I, we joined, and just very a few days before her book release, all our kegs arrived in Sweden. So we were also able to have some on tap, so which was super nice. And so you can tell, yeah, some importers and are more open to it because they have already, yeah, more experience with it. But I've also, for example, talking about France, my partners in Paris, they really like the idea, and they are working with our kegs now, and they are really into it. I mean, they're, I guess, generally they import German wine to Paris, so they are already a little bit outside the box of Paris, maybe. So for them, but yeah, they also just, like it. And also some other countries who were completely new to it, they said, okay, we'll start with a small amount and we'll see how things go. And so I'm now, it's actually quite positive. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, well, I was gonna say something quite similar, which is the alternative packaging, just because it is, if you were to take one step, the alternative packaging piece, changing the that portion of the overall carbon footprint would be, the most impactful overall. And so, for me, that's the piece that I'm really hoping to either participate in the development of more of, or, see happen. As part of our wine club, it was really challenging to source alternative packaging. There were a lot of wines that I noticed were sold that way, but we just couldn't get our hands on them because their quantities weren't large. So I think Texier Chat Fou was in, I don't know if it's Bagnums or boxes, but we weren't able to get any of that for the club. And so sometimes I would say, okay, well, do you know any producers working with lighter weight bottles? And people would sort of say, well, I don't know, let me look back. And it was hard to kind of get that information because the distributors and importers are not necessarily primed to make that a key component of the conversation. That's a whole nother sort of can of worms or whatever the expression is. So that we could talk about at some other point. But we did one month have bag and box from Tablas Creek out in California. We did offer one for them. It was such an interesting situation because, it was, typically we offered 3 bottles a month, but in that month it was, a large box. So we offered just the box. And I actually did an event so that I could get our wine club members kind of familiar with the box. They could feel it. I could show them how it opened and kind of make it a fun experiment, kind of like what you were talking about, Christine, making the kegs fun. And I think that went over pretty well. I think people were definitely like, okay, so where's the rest of the month's wines? And I was like, no, it's just this box. But the wine was incredible, and it drank wonderfully. It was a white Rhone blend. Their Catalan Blanc, I believe, was the specific wine that we had. And so, the proof was in the pudding, and the wine was wonderful. So that, of course, was a really important, necessary component. The other thing I just kind of wanted to point to as well is in, I guess, London, there is a group called the Sustainable Wine Roundtable. I'm super excited because they're working on a packaging choice framework that I think will allow people to look through and say, okay, this works for me, this doesn't. I have these logistical challenges, shipping challenges around this particular option, and hopefully land on something that lowers their carbon footprint, but still works, for them from a business perspective. So I'm really excited to see that come out, and I'm hopeful. I just do think that this is such an incredible opportunity, and so it was great to read about the kegs in particular. I have less experience with those, but very exciting.
And one of the beauties of kegs is that you can make it, well, 1 keg, 2 kegs of your best cuvee available for a certain bar, or premium Michelin restaurant. So there's no need to choose your easiest or sort of run-of-the-mill wine available by the keg. It's you can make it as a premium thing as well. I mean, as well as the magnums and pouches, of course, and cans. I mean, there's no need for it to be like a basic wine. I would just add that, I mean, if you're a wine producer, to go organic is just like first step you should do. It will reduce the carbon footprint by 20 to 25% compared to a normal bottle of wine. And then to stop plowing and store the carbon instead of releasing it is just like a big move. And the third thing, to experiment with alternatives to the single-use bottle. If you do those three things, you've just made a huge positive impact. Yeah.
I totally agree. And I think if you are looking at it from the consumer perspective, if you can identify those producers who are working in that way, still a challenge, still takes research. There's no labeling shortcut to let people know about that, but maybe that will come someday. But I think supporting those producers is our top priority. And I just really want to urge people to pick up a copy of the book. Camilla, in a minute, I'll give you a chance to let people know how they can do that. But I just think we only touched lightly on these 13 really powerful examples. And this book gave me so much hope and so much inspiration. I really internalized it to my own life, questioning my own practices and choices. And I think we can all do that. But it's in a very positive, transforming sort of sense. It doesn't feel heavy or like a guilt trip. You really sense the possibilities. And I love that. And I hope everyone will go out and find out for themselves. So Camilla, let our listeners know, please, where they could best find your book.
Sure. The best way is through my website, which is very easy. My name. So it's camillagjerde.com. I think it will be in the notes, so you don't have to take my word for it. It might be difficult. So yeah, go to the webpage and you'll find it. And there are some people and bars and bookstores, independent, that have it as well. So Miki has it, for instance. So yeah,
Right. You shipped it to me.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I think something that people will have to get the book to find out more about is actually the environmental impact of the book itself. I think it's fascinating. Camilla has included sort of meta story of the publisher she chose and all that went into thinking about reducing the impact of the book itself and how it will get into readers' hands. So I think that's a wonderful aspect for people to discover. And we also want to let people know that Christina's wines under the Piri label are, as she said, widely exported and available, and some of the most exciting, whistle clean, stable, beautiful, and expressive natural wines out there. So I urge people to go and try them. And Miki's Good Wine Club and concepts. We'll have all the links in the show notes, but I think it's really worth seeing the way she's talking about wine and thinking about wine and connecting consumers with all these ideas in a very concrete way.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.
yeah.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everyone, for joining us.
Really appreciate it. All right.
All right. Have a wonderful afternoon.
You too.
Thanks a lot.
Thank
Bye,
you,
all.
everybody.
Thank you so much.